Welcome to a new wave of entrepreneurship by Venture for Canada. Venture for Canada is a national charity on a mission to foster the entrepreneurial skills and mindsets of young Canadians. Our vision is a Canada where young people can equitably realize their entrepreneurial potential to help build one of the most prosperous entrepreneurial ecosystems in the world.
I am very excited to have Katie Dunsworth-Reiach, the co-founder of TalkShop, on Venture for Canada's podcast, A New Wave of Entrepreneurship. In this episode today, our theme is scaling a marketing agency from $0 to $10 million in annual revenue. And I think Katie is a fantastic person to explore this topic. Katie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
To get things kicked off, Katie, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the origins of your marketing agency?
Yeah. Well, I would start by saying, I honestly think I'm more of a serial entrepreneur than just an agency owner. So, owning TalkShop or starting TalkShop, yeah, it was definitely part of the journey. And my journey really began. I went to school to study journalism, and I remember on the very first day of journalism school, the teacher saying, if you want to make money, you're in the wrong place. This is not the place to make money. And I remember like being kind of washed over with this feeling of like, how did I do want to make money, and how did I not think about this? And yeah, I went through the program, but pretty quickly learned that I could take the skills. I wanted to be like, I actually wanted to be an Oprah producer, which I'll get back to that in a sec. But I realized that the skills that I had and I had gained through school were things that I could apply more to like career in communications, a career in PR. And so I got hired at a cool startup at the time. They're now called O2E Brands, but at that time it was 1-800-GOT-JUNK. And yeah, I really got to see sort of a startup scale up in action. They gave me like a ridiculous amount of trust and responsibility at like the age of 22. And I was leading their marketing department by age, their communications department by 24. And at that same time, I had met a group of women at the company that were all sort of in the same place and stage. And we were all pretty, I would say, financially illiterate, like really kind of living beyond our means, not paying attention to just like kind of key things when it came to our personal finances. And so long story short is we formed a little group. It just really started as a group that we did like a book club, except we called it a money club. And I remember one day in my work, searching on the Oprah website, it was like our CEO's goal to get on the Oprah show. And I had seen this posting for like, oh, had you followed? And we'd actually followed a series that Oprah had done. And so I just responded, and I'm, a pretty good writer and I'm good at PR. And so I put my PR spin on our little money group and the success that we'd had because we were sort of self-teaching personal finance. And yeah, a few months later they called, and long story short, we were on Oprah. That resulted in that concept of a money club actually turning into like a startup. We got a bunch of funding. We ended up getting a television series that ran both in Canada and on the Oprah network in the States, and then a series of book deals with Random House. So yeah, I very quickly went from sort of working in like an in-house marketing team to doing this like bizarre business, non-business, to then really seeing like, that as a business with kind of fluctuating revenue model. But a lot of people from my past life were like, can we hire you? Can we work with you? And so TalkShop was really born out of that, being able to, communicate, generate earned media. And and today it's, we're, like you mentioned, 10 million. We're in the US and Canada and offices all across the place and about 60 employees.
Congrats on the company that you've built. And on the Venture for Canada podcast, we've interviewed a lot of different folks who built product companies. And you're one of the first individuals that we've spoken with who's built an agency, a company, a professional services company. What do you think are some of the challenges and opportunities of building an agency company?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest opportunities is it's a fairly low barrier to entry. I mean, I never take for granted that we don't have to have inventory or manufacturing equipment. It really is salaries, and maybe, we have offices, but many companies don't even need that. So that is, an opportunity. I think we're also working in an environment where so many folks are looking to hire experts and really open to, whether it's contractors, agencies, just that they understand that having all of that in house is not necessarily feasible. And so yeah, it's a good market. I would say some of the challenges and how much time do you have? But certainly not all agencies are created equal. I think that it can almost be challenging for somebody to who's looking to find the right partner, to discern, do they have the right mix, do they have the right knowledge for what I'm looking for, am I going to get the client customer experience that I want. The pricing can sometimes be all over the map, and there's frankly lots of charlatans in the space that will say they know what they're talking about and they don't. And it's an evolving, we work in an evolving space. So in the almost, God, I'm dating myself, but I've been at this line of work for about 20 years, and from where I started to where it is now, you have to have a tremendous amount of, if nothing else, willingness to learn new things, to try, to fail, to really adapt with new technology, and just embrace change.
Looking back over the last like 2 decades, what are some of the most like significant changes that impacted your business?
Yeah, yeah. Well, certainly, the introduction of social media, and really social media as a tool for consuming information, whether it's through advertising, through news, that was a game changer. And I'm making myself sound like a dinosaur, but when I started, it was like out of home marketing, and there were big traditional, the ad agencies that existed at that time were like, not Mad Men style, but they had massive budgets, and, because there's only a few places to advertise. And so now, how you get your message out there has been so fragmented. And so, yeah, that's probably the single biggest change we've seen.
Uh, What, like when you think of the marketing kind of agency model, one of the things that comes to mind is some of the challenges in like retention of like entry level employees, that there
Yeah.
can be a pretty significant kind of level of turnover.
Yeah.
What are you, in your experience, are there ways to ameliorate that?
Yeah, there absolutely are. And I think, we've been lucky. We've been ranked as a top employer. I think really early days, we made a pretty conscious effort of recognizing, for our clients, because my whole job is just to work in the best interests of my clients and really ensure that we're getting them out there and doing the best work possible. And in order to do that, you need the best people possible. And in order to keep the best people, you have to really adapt to what both your clients need, but also what they're looking for. And so, I would say that we have really tried to do that by listening. I think I've seen it evolve. Some of the things that I've seen recently, and this was like a very good learning for us. And like I mentioned, we still hold office space because a portion of our colleagues do want a physical space to meet at. Our clients do want that. It is helpful, but we were not hard and fast about the need to like return to work. We really heard from our people that, like, I want to be able to work from home, I want to be able to work hybrid, like simple things like that, where we try to listen. I think we've really leaned into parts of the reasons why folks are there. We are an organization where we invest in and grow our people. And if you're somebody who wants to grow with an organization, we're a great place to start. At the same time, that's not a light job. Like, that is, it takes a certain constitution of an individual who really wants to. One of our values is get it, and get it really means, it's not like a hustle culture thing. It's a really like, get in there, figure it out, and get after it, in the sense that you understand, you understand the assignment and you get it done. And those are the folks that that I think thrive. And then at the same time, we've also really seen and heard and appreciate and respect that times are changing. It is important to lean into things like equity. Seek equity is another value of ours. And that really means looking at who runs the organization, all white women, really needing to understand the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in, not just who we employ, but how we operate right into the fabric of, what we do and how we do it. And so that has been, a major relearning, investment, constant evolution around kind of, yeah, how we approach things. And so, sorry, that's a long answer, but
On the topic of people, one of the things I love to zoom in on are the stories of some of the first employees of different companies. And when you think of the early years of TalkShop, what were some of the key hires that you made that helped the company survive through those first couple of years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some of the key hires, I would say, looking back, and this is not going to be maybe what you'd expect to hear, because I think that the most important hires were the ones that allowed us to not work in the business and actually work on the business. So I remember feeling like, and it was probably just after $1 million. And I would say to any entrepreneur out there, getting from 0 to 1 million is like getting from 1 million to 2 million, 2 million to 4 million, 4 million to 10 million felt a whole lot easier than 0 to 1 million. And that's because you do everything: your HR, your accounting, your client services, you're doing, yeah, you're cleaning the floors sometimes. And so I remember really feeling like we made our first admin hire, and that meant that there was somebody to help with like actual accounting tasks. It was almost sort of leaning into operations, and that person, who was actually a sister of or a sister-in-law of my partner Sarah's, that wasn't even her background, but she really saw that it was like, if these folks don't get out of the work, we're never going to grow, and we need them out there and talking to people, and they're so mired down by these responsibilities. So that administrative hire, I would say, was massive. And then there was a key point where, we were sort of growing as this, like, I don't want to say nebulous entity, but we really reached a point where we'd actually worked with some like business consultants, and they saw the trajectory that we were on, but we were also pretty good at recognizing, okay, we're stuck here and we don't know how to like get to the next level. And one of their recommendations was like, you are going to have to either niche down in certain things. You work with startups and scale ups and technology companies, you work with real estate companies, you work with, and because we were doing so much diversified stuff, we really struggled with like how to do that. And yeah, we got some good advice, and ultimately ended up putting sort of 4 people in place that ran individual business units that just allowed us to be like, okay, we don't have to, we're not trying to be everything to everyone, but at the same time, we do have very niche specific skills and expertise for startups and scale ups and companies that are looking to, raise venture capital or go public or get acquired. And so we know how to work with them. And if you want to do that, this is a team that can help you. So those hires were really pivotal as well. And then just recently, I mean, we expanded into the US, and those hires have been foundational because the market, even how things are done in the US versus Canada, is very, very different. And Canadian companies just trying to, like, we were pretty naive and being like, oh, we'll just go down there and get an LLC and start doing business, and it's like everything is different, and even how they work and what we're doing down there. So we've had to really make key hires that have been able to do that.
Zooming into the way marketing agencies work in Canada and the US, I've lived in both countries, definitely at a high level aware of the significant differences. But in terms of the marketing agency world, what are some of the real differences that exist in your eyes of operating a marketing agency in Canada versus the United States?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the budgets. I mean, the budgets are exponentially larger in the US. I think at the same time, the US is used to far more, I want to say, like complicated, like affiliate programs and things that just we didn't see as much in Canada. Way more paid media. It's just because the budgets are larger, they're able to do more. Um, and Canada, it's quite interesting. Like we operate across the country, but definitely I would say the lion's share of sort of the bigger budgets are controlled out of markets like Toronto and Montreal, and specifically Toronto. And you do see even like nuances in that market between really wanting sort of expert level understanding and high levels of service. Some come in with like I don't want to say like an antiquated approach, but they're very prescriptive about what they want and they just want you to do it and it's all about results. And others are really about like creativity, big thinking. And so it's figuring out, where you play best and not, like I said, I think there's some real charlatans in our industry that are trying to be everything to everyone. And if there's anything I've learned, it's like, grow where you're planted, know what your strengths are. People respect the honesty of being like, we're not probably the best people for that job, but I could tell you who is. And yeah, I'd far rather grow a business doing business like that than anything else.
Let's zoom in a little bit to business development. And
Mhm.
when you think of like the first like year or two of your company, like how did you get your first like clients? And in your answer, if you can be like as specific as
Oh,
possible about like specific clients that you sold.
yeah, okay. Well, I think one of the biggest ones, and I I actually am like I would say so. I was in a unique position where the organization that I came from, which was an entrepreneurial organization, was deeply entrenched in the YPO network, and they, for whatever reason, put me the CEO that I worked for tasked me with sort of like being the face of there are all these people from the YPO network that would want to come and tour. They ran like a call center and they were a franchise business. So there was kind of specifics to that business model. And so anybody that came through that network, he would say like, talk to Katie, and then I would literally like run a business tour talking about every facet of the business and then host a Q&A. Like it was so funny. And so I built like a really deep network in YPO almost because I like was acting like the business owner. And so when I left, if I'm being totally honest, I wasn't even looking to start an agency. Like so many people reaching out to me that I was like, oh, sure, I would work with you. And then that sort of evolved. But I really did lean into that network. And I would say quite early on, we got like Expedia cruise ship centers was a massive one that was like a big, that came from that network that they really entrusted us with a massive program. Again, they kind of had some franchising stuff and that was like a niche we knew about. Another big game changing one that kind of made our mark in real estate was Sotheby's International Realty. They again took a chance on us, and we really developed an awesome strategy that still is kind of paramount to what they're doing today, which really looks at data and putting out reports that talk to sort of the top tier of luxury real estate trends they're seeing, things to watch out for, market specifics. And we harness that in a pretty scrappy way. So those would be a few that were early days clients. And then yeah, I think my biggest business development approach is like the more people you can get in front of, specifically in areas where you're passionate and exceptional, and they feel the same, then there's just whether there's synergies to work together or synergies, I think that just like very organically grows your business and in a way that doesn't feel icky and sales salesy, because I'm not a salesperson at the end of the day. I kind of despise the idea of selling, but I like helping people grow their business and I like working with smart businesses.
Yeah, it's all about relationships at the end of the day. And one thing that came into my head was just the challenge of like when you're first starting a marketing agency and you're pitching to these huge like clients
Yeah.
or huge prospective clients. You don't have a huge track record. Let's say you're potentially taking on a line of business like the Expedia business that maybe is like transformational to like the size of your total like revenue.
Yeah.
And this business is by potentially hiring you, making a big bet. Like they're making a bet on their brand, on their
Yeah.
reputation.
Mhm.
How did you, give that sense of trust that to these kind of clients, of them willing to like make a like, in particular, zooming on that
Yeah.
phrase you used of like take a bet on you.
Yeah.
How did you make these companies feel comfortable to make a bet on TalkShop?
Yeah, I think think one of the biggest things, this might sound like redundant, but you also have to bet on yourself. And I'm willing to, say, like, if this doesn't work out in 30 days or 60 days, like, here's your money back. Or like, money back might be a bit extreme, but like, there's no pressure. Like, you're going to know really quickly that this is working or not. And here's how. And, what I have seen more times than not is anybody who's a relatively smart investor. And I mean, I feel like this way about digital marketing, where I'm like, I know if I put $100 in, I get $400 out. I will make that bet over and over and over and over and over. That makes sense for us. And so when you can really lay that framework of like, you're going to pay me this and I'm going to show you something that is worth that and it will improve your business, people are confident. And then you have to bet on yourself that you can do that. And I think there are a lot of um, it's unfortunately more the women that I see that are not willing to speak that confidently, even though I think we all have very similar, skills and capabilities. I don't think I'm especially gifted at the communications marketing PR side of things. I think I'm scrappy, but I'm also very confident in what works, what doesn't work. I don't like wasting people's time. And I think people appreciate that.
Agreed. One other area I'd love to zoom in on in terms of early stage marketing agency, which I imagine is also relevant at any stage of a marketing agency's development, is cash flow
Yeah.
and how to manage cash
Favorite.
flow. Yeah, exactly. In the context, I love this dog, or I love this book, Shoe Dog, which you might have read
Oh,
by
I
Phil
read
Knight.
it. Yeah, Phil Knight. Yeah.
And he zooms in so much about cash flow in the context of Nike and their business. But I think often it's something that like people don't
Yeah.
they'll talk about it like a surface level, but
Yeah.
they won't zoom in on especially to understand some of the intricacies of an industry. So my question to you, Katie, is what are some of the challenges that marketing agencies face as it relates to
Yeah.
cash flow, particularly in their early stages? And then as a second part of the question, how do you mitigate those kind of challenges? What are things that marketing agency entrepreneurs can do to lessen their cash flow burdens?
Yeah, so I think probably the number one, and again, this is like the 0 to whatever million, is for us. The game changed really when we got like a director of finance and somebody who was minding the store, and that there was like constant reporting on AR, cash flow, projections, on top of like taxes, and even the more complex stuff around like payroll tax. Like all of that can be really overwhelming. That is, so once you get somebody solid in that seat, I feel like it gets a lot easier. In those early days, I mean, the most simple thing was like friggin' accounts receivable. It is really uncomfortable. Most people are out there, they don't have someone who's asking to get paid. And so they're doing it, and it's most people's least favorite thing to do is say, hey, I sent you an invoice, where's it going? And so AR is massive. And so what I would say today is like, we live in a world. I mean, there's one flippin' thing we got out of the pandemic. It's like the normalization of electronic transfers. You should not be waiting for a check anymore. And if you are, I would really think long and hard about if that is somebody that you want to work with. You can certainly look at your payment terms. I think that was something that helps for us. And another thing with cash flow is, and it gets tricky, right? Because I definitely think in a service based business, we did not ever want to be dipping into a line of credit or really going into any borrowed cash. But there are points in time where you do have to make strategic investments. And for us, that might be, we've acquired a number of businesses, like things where we might need to use or want to use our own cash, and then cash flow is tight. And so I would just really stress, get a good financial partner, a good banking partner, get a good mentor also who kind of sets the framework of like, here's where we should be worried. Here's where we should borrow. Here's where we should use our own money. And if we need to do that and cash is tight, like we know that we have, the ability and accessibility to capital that we can quickly repay. And yeah, those would be my
A lot of services entrepreneurs have described to me that they have challenges getting large lines of credit from banks.
Yeah.
That banks are sometimes not willing. Can you walk through a little bit? What was your process
And
of kind of the
women specifically, it's actually quite, I mean, like I said, I had a startup that really fought the good fight for women in financial literacy. And I think that they're, yeah, are quite, what I would say on how to get larger lines of credit is like you have to treat it like a job, and you have to sell them on you and then shop them against each other and really say, look, I'm talking to BDC. I mean, I will shamelessly promote CIBC, and we work with other financial institutions, but CIBC really, we were able to purchase property. They gave us like an incredible program around, yeah, line of credit and just ability to lend to us, and took a gamble on us because they believed in what we were doing, and we had to sell them that dream. But we've delivered on that like tenfold, and I have moved all my personal finances over to them. Like I really believe in when someone takes a bet on you, you bet right back on them. And so, yeah, I think that, I mean, we shop them hard against each other.
one thing to double click on that I think is interesting is that purchasing property as like I
Yeah.
assume the property you mean real
Commercial
estate,
real estate. Yeah. Yeah.
which is a little bit unique, at least from my understanding of a lot of like similar services businesses. To your point, a lot of agencies, like many, smaller mid-sized, are like all virtual.
Yeah.
And there can be debate on even a lot of huge companies don't own their offices.
Yeah.
What was kind of your rationale for as a company, using your resources to make that investment in real estate?
Yeah, it was, it was really simple math. It was like at that time, what we were looking to pay in rent, we could own something. And so the nut we had to crack was like we needed to get that initial down payment. And we had some of it, but not all of it. And yeah, and so in the time, again, this is where CIBC stepped in, and in the time that we have owned. So we bought that in 2015. So coming on 10 years, we have made close to $2 million in appreciation on that asset. And we've paid ourselves. Like we would have paid that to someone else. Like I don't, different people. I mean, and I understand, right? It's like you're carrying overhead and it's not your core business. And sometimes the rent for, on owning like we own a unit in a building. We don't own a building. And sure, I'd love to own a building, although commercial real estate right now is probably not the game to be in. But yeah, so it just made, I mean, really simple math just made sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think in the based on the how the market is, and to your point, like making that calculation in certain historical investment contexts, it makes a ton of sense. But it
Yeah.
does depend on
Yeah, right
the
now, would I
context.
go out and buy in downtown Toronto? No.
Yeah,
But
um,
I like owning assets, so that's just a
yeah,
preference thing too. Yeah.
yeah. And there's a lot of times people think too you need to like buy a house or things, but there's office condos. There's creative ways
Yeah. Yeah.
to buy real estate
Yeah.
as a company that I
Yeah.
think is interesting.
Mhm.
One other challenge that I've heard from friends who've worked in marketing agencies is this balance between like resources and like profit.
Yeah.
Obviously, that if a marketing agency, to your point of charlatans in the space, can just be as like stingy as possible with
Yeah.
staffing and be
Totally.
really profitable, but provide low
Oh, I know.
quality kind of
Our
service.
industry has such a bad rep for that, about being not paying well, and yeah. Yeah.
Now, at the same time, profits are important. So, kind of when you're making strategic kind of like decisions about profit levels, whether to invest or not, how do you think about it? Like, what are frameworks that you use?
Yeah. So, I mean, we work backwards from what's best for our client. So, what's best for our client is really getting like world class people, talent that are working on their business. And in order to do that, you have to pay people, I think, above average, pay them fairly and then some, and treat them really well. And so, we have just sort of figured out what the salary to revenue ratio should look like for our business. I think in simple terms, like a good professional services business, it's about 50-50. 50% is going to um, salaries, and then you have other costs going towards your overhead, legal, all financial, all of your other things. And we're super transparent with our team about both, what we are trying to drive as like top line, like, or bottom line, like net income, EBITDA. Again, going, the financial literacy thing loops into so much of my professional and personal life, but I think in particular, people in our space, and in particular women, have been told, oh, you're creative, you're in marketing, you're in comms, like, you don't need to understand how to read an income statement and a P&L. Like, hell you don't. Like, you should. Like, that's a great thing. That's a great skill to know how to do. And so we will teach you how to do that. And once we teach you how to do that, we're going to teach you the levers to pull. I had this conversation this morning, which was like, we really look at, like, again, it always has to be in the best interest of our clients. That's the founding focus. But then after that, it's like, you need to make it profitable. Like, we're not running a not-for-profit, so there has to be a margin. Here are the levers you can pull to do that. Do good work, but then also manage your resources effectively. And so we kind of, like, we bookended on ways that they can do that without compromising the work. And they're really, like, I don't want to say that we've gamified it, but they're really engaged. Like, I'm amazed at the number of conversations I'm having with sort of like artistic, creative people who are like, but I've got to make my profit target. And you're like, great. Okay. But, like, yeah, let's talk about it. So,
One other area that I'd love to zoom into as it relates to this kind of scaling question is scaling like client like service. Like I can imagine in the early days, like when you're like two or three people, like or even 10 people, you were maybe pretty involved in like the actual like client service. At 60 people, I can imagine it changes, and there's this giving up of responsibility, and you have increasing levels, and you potentially in some clients are quite removed from the direct service that's being provided. What advice do you have to a listener on how do you scale client service in a marketing agency?
yeah. So the advice I would have on scaling your service is like, so there's sort of two parts to that. Scaling your service is like always listening and getting feedback on what the market needs, and if you are or are not the right person to do that. And I think we've done that through really, like, organic extensions of service, and then betting on either smart people within our team that we have seen be able to expand that, whether it's through, like, we built out a whole, at a time when we were really only doing sort of earned media and traditional comms, we built out a whole digital division. And that was partially like finding a really exceptional external person, and then also, betting on and investing in some people that wanted to evolve and move into that direction of the business. What I was going to say about scaling that is that there really is, like, a time and a place where, you have to decide if there's an investment of your time, an investment of your capital, or an investment into another market or sector. And I think we have been pretty good at, again, kind of working the back math of, like, oh, okay, we're getting there. We hear there's a lot of demand. Like, one of the ones that I hear all the time is like, there's a lot of demand for SEO. So fine, I kind of file that away as like, is that something that we should be considering? And then we kind of work it backwards of like, well, what are they charging, and how much would having that in, how much, projecting out how much do we actually think we could get? And more often than not, we get to the place where it's like, we wouldn't really be that good at it, and we can't really make money on it. And we're not that passionate about it. So we're probably not the ones to do it. And we'd rather partner with somebody who's really, really good. So it's only when it kind of fits that, like, that cross section that of, we're good, there's upside opportunity, it's growing, that we move forward.
One more granular area that I'd love to explore is kind of like time tracking
Yeah.
amongst kind of clients.
Yeah.
And I've heard from one friend just like that he worked in an agency that around like 50 people.
Yeah.
It was one of the partners in the agency was just the the debates within the agency on how do you track time that's spent on clients
Huh.
and doing this. What advice do you have to aspiring marketing agency entrepreneurs on best practices for
Yeah.
really getting a sense of how much money you're investing into each client?
Yeah. So you have to have that data, and that data has to come from time tracking. So you can't ignore time tracking. You also need to bake in, almost part and parcel with your the financial side of your business, that you take a long, hard look then at what that time is actually being spent on, and is it driving value for your clients? Are there, like, I think anytime I even dig in now, I'm like, did we need to have 4 people on that call? Could that have been done? You have to keep like that idea of sort of Kaizen, continual improvement. Like, you have to keep looking at ways, again, never losing sight of like doing the best work for clients is the goal. But there's lots of technology. Like, I even look now, my God, like, talk about adoption of technology and AI. So like, I would take a call if you and I are having a meeting and you want to do business with us. I now run an AI in the background that takes all the notes on that call. So I used to feverishly be typing. So I'm way more present and interested in, not that I wasn't interested, but I was taking notes. So sometimes I would miss stuff. And so I'm way more engaged in the conversation. That then turns into like, okay, I'm interested in seeing what you can do. Send us a proposal. Well, then I'm able to synthesize that conversation, feed it through AI to say, summarize, the call, what they're looking for. And then that like lays out the framework of what I'm putting in the proposal. And so my brain is just going to things that are like, it's good at, like, what's the strategy of how I would build this out for them, and how much would that cost, and those sorts of things. AI can't do that per se, but it has really cut down our time on like, admin heavy tasks. And so I think that yeah, you have to, sorry, I know this was a question about time tracking, but you have to track your time to know where that time is going, to know where there are opportunities to be more efficient with it.
When you were first like starting out, how long did it take you to develop like an effective time tracking system?
Well, it was, I mean, I would say we hit rock bottom in probably from year 1 to 5. We had almost, I remember one year being in single digit profit numbers, and my accountant saying, like, you might as well get a job. Like, you're at this point, you're just working to work. Like, you're not really growing a business. And so that was a very hard conversation of like, we have to make this business more profitable or it's not going anywhere. And that ended up being like our own kind of rudimentary system of time tracking. Like, it was sort of like, it started on an Excel document and then it moved into a smart sheet, and then better tech came out. There's still a really great, like, for somebody starting out, there's a really great tool called Harvest app. But Harvest is like a pretty inexpensive, great, user interface. As you get more sophisticated with reporting, the reporting, wasn't what we needed anymore, because we were actually plugging it into a financial back end of our business. But, you can do it very inexpensively. And yeah, and that really makes a difference.
Fascinating. I'd love to zoom into that 5 year mark. And you talked about the first 5 years of the business being a real struggle. And then it sounds like things kind of took off kind of from there.
Yeah.
Beyond time tracking, like what are the things that divided that first 5 years from later?
Yeah. So I think the first 5 years, if I'm being brutally honest, and there's just a couple of things, is it's like we took on, so what I never lose sight of is, people want to work with me specifically. And I think you mentioned that earlier. I still work with a ton of my clients one on one. I am not in the everyday, not, I don't say minutia, like, then I'm not in the day to day handling of a file per se. But if I sold you, if you're working with me, like morning, noon, or night, I'm available. So that was important to know, that like, we're not going to get out of the work, but do I need to be the one writing copy? And I think what was starting to happen was that we were doing every level of the job and kind of not covering, sometimes it was like you didn't want to give some hard feedback or something, or it took too much time. It was easier for me to just edit something and get it good and get it out the door than it was for me to go back to a person and say, hey, you missed the mark. Here's where I need you to do it again. So we actually had a business coach who came in and was like, here's where you're getting stuck. Like, you're literally stuck, and you pay these people. That is their job. So if they fuck it up, if they mess up, like, they need to feel the burn, and you're feeling the burn. They're not. So we started to do that. I think that we also got really good at figuring out where the value was, like really where, from a pricing standpoint, one of the things I do not compromise on, I do a tremendous amount of issues management. And there's been times where like career ending or brand ending stories could end up in the news, and I'm able to keep them out of the news. That's called, I value built for that. Sometimes that only takes me a couple of hours. Well, if it weren't for someone like me, like your career could be ruined. So I charge differently. I don't charge you per hour. I charge you a fee, and it relies on me being able to do that work. So I think we got smarter about some things like that, that there are things where you charge for your time, and there are things where you value bill, where it's like, this is worth this. And so and you're really
Yeah.
clear on, like, there's just value there. And yeah, that's made a big difference. And then I would say the other thing that just was like, it's so dorky, but it's just like real-time financials, like just being able to produce real-time financials to see expenses, costs, you know, revenue coming in, the pipeline of revenue coming in, and then being able to make decisions quickly. Because again, to cash flow, it's like, if you don't adjust, and we're in that right now, it's like the market has shifted and we know what to do. We've been through this drill a couple of times, but I see other agencies who are like, I'm not paying myself, and we're doing layoffs. And it's like, yeah, we saw this coming.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I heard someone say this line that with small or even like medium-sized businesses, like businesses sub 100 employees,
Yeah.
that the annual budget is basically shot by March. What I mean by that is that this in big companies, or I find people who've only worked in big companies,
Yeah.
they think, oh, annual budgets, things.
Yeah.
And in Venture Canada, we're around 35 people, and I'm like, it still say there's an annual budget, but the budget is constantly updated.
General. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like every month, I have a practice, and you probably do the same, where I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, income slightly changed,
Yeah.
expense, we and you kind of constantly, it's
Adjust.
like it's like you have these scales, right? Income and expenses, and you're kind of like
Yeah.
need to adjust them based on how the other kind of thing works.
Yeah. And
Um,
what's the saying? What gets measured gets managed. And I like, that's true. We do measure a lot of things, and we really manage them. And then that ultimately, yeah, helps scale.
Katie, it has been a pleasure speaking with you. I've enjoyed the tactical advice that you've provided.
Awesome.
To maybe have like a somewhat closing kind of question, is is there any thing that you haven't shared thus far that you want to share with the audience that you think is going to be like, that's something that's maybe you wish you said, but you haven't had an opportunity to share so far?
Hmm. I would just say that I think the importance of, like, I don't mean this to sound cliche, but like, integrity in business is something that you can't pay for. It really, it really is so important. And if there's anything if there's anything I've learned, your reputation matters, and having a reputation that's built on integrity and doing the right thing. And that's like, by your own people, by yourself, and by your clients. It's just so important. And I think it's becoming increasingly harder to be an entrepreneur in this country. And it makes me really sad, because it's been such a, yeah, it's just been such a transformative journey. But for those that take that tough road, having integrity is something that will never serve you wrong.
And a related kind of question, and by the way, I agree on the importance of integrity. It's one of the 4 values of Venture for Canada.
Mhm.
Um, what do you think is like a common misconception that a lot of people have about marketing agencies and how to build a successful marketing agency?
Oh, yeah, a few things. So I think a lot of people think it's like sort of smoke and mirrors, and it's sort of the like Mad Men people, and offices pushing out creative, that doesn't really go anywhere, or doesn't do much, or overpaid, like sort of fat cats and underpaid workers. Sorry, and what was the question?
A common misconception that a
Yeah.
lot of people have about building a successful marketing agency.
Yeah, so I think the misconception is that either it's easy, you're doing it and you're not paying your people well, And, I think it's quite the opposite. Like, I think in order to be able to survive, people aren't dumb. And there's still enough opportunity out there that if you don't do good work and if you don't treat people well, I don't believe in, certainly in this landscape, that you'll last very long. So those that are surviving and thriving, in my opinion, usually are doing something right on those fronts.
Katie, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast.
Thanks. It's been fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of A New Wave of Entrepreneurship. Stay connected with us via our socials and through our email list. And be sure to subscribe to us in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss our next episode. Have feedback on today's episode? Let us know directly in the app. Thanks again for listening and for joining the new wave of entrepreneurs. Till next time.